This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, two X-Men 97 super fans, Paul Jasley.
Hello, humanoids.
And Kait Lamphere.
Mike, I haven't seen this show. I'm sorry.
No, you're ruining my bit, Kait. Oh my gosh. I was going to say, I can't believe you guys are such big fans. I thought I was the biggest X-Men fan. And okay, whatever. Well, that's fine. You guys haven't seen the show. I have seen X-Men 97. I watched the first two episodes. I don't know when the third one comes out. Quite honestly, I don't keep track of that stuff. Normally, I would just go back and binge it. I think maybe later in the episode or in the post-credits, we'll talk a little bit about X-Men 97, just because I have some thoughts. I've been reintroducing my body back to the X-Men universe, and we'll get into all of that. But if you're not watching us live here on Twitch, because we're recording this episode live on Twitch, you should be. It's twitch.tv/IRCB podcast. But if you want to hear the post credits, and when you're not listening live, you can always check them out on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast, where all patrons at a paid tier of any kind will get access to post credits. You can hear all of our raunchy, riveting, super critical views about comics that we usually don't share on here on the show. But today we're here to talk about comic books, and I'm so excited because Paul and Kait are here. So I'm going to ask you two the legally mandated questions that I have for every single episode. That is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Kait.
I've been pretty good. I've been reading a lot of comics. I've kind of got two things going on. I'm trying to read the Goodreads reading challenge this year, and I'm also trying to read a bunch of stuff that I added to my to-read list when I started it in 2014, I think. So I am pulling up some strange things that I like fully forgot that I added. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find some of them, honestly. That's 10 years ago. So some of these things are out of print now.
Oh.
So, but that is not what I'm talking about today. Today I'm going to talk about City of Secrets. This is by Victoria Ying. Mike, you might remember when I came to visit you in New York like 6 months ago. We went to Midtown Comics and I picked up this book. And I picked it up because it had been on my to-read list. I'd seen it advertised somewhere. And the art style, especially on the cover, looks like a watercolor bande dessinée. So I did some research, but I'm pretty sure that it is from the US. It's published by Penguin Random House. Mm-hmm. And the creator, Victoria Ying, has worked as an animator for Disney on like Big Hero 6, Moana, like movies like that. So I'm pretty sure that she lives here in the US. And the endorsements on the back of this book include Molly Knox Ostertag and Wendy Zhu. And so that places it pretty much firmly in this like kick-ass adventure kids genre that I like a lot.
Oh yeah.
So even before I opened the book, I was like, I'm gonna like this. So this story takes place in like a steampunk-esque clockwork city, the City of Secrets. That's a pretty good title for it. It follows a young high-class girl who discovers an orphan boy who lives in a switchboard building. Remember like old school switchboards where like you call them and they connect you and everything. Mm-hmm. So he lives in this old building that used to be a theater. They mentioned that at some point in the story, so it's huge. Mm-hmm. And then it's also got all these clockwork things about it. And this boy has lived there his whole life, so he knows what all of these like clockwork steampunk levers do. You switch this one and this platform raises, or this floor fully turns over. So there's some hijinks that ensue, those secrets that I mentioned in the title, Mm-hmm. And so these like levers set up this like Home Alone type hijinks, and that's a pretty good time to just like see him reach behind him and pull a lever, and then crazy things happen. There are nefarious factions at work in the city, and the kids, of course, they get involved in all of that. Of course, that's what the story is. And I just thought that this story was really well put together. Like there are all these hints for the story, for this mystery. There's a lot of foreshadowing. And it just all combines really nicely at the end of the book, the reveal of the mystery. And there are some loose ends in the story. Like I get to the end and I'm like, but what about this character and this character and this character? And then I did a little bit of research, just like 2 seconds. There is a sequel to this book, which is called The City of Illusion. So I'm going to have to come back to New York with you, go back to Midtown Comics and get the sequel to this book.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the only place in America where this book is sold. So, Kait, I understand, and reluctantly, I guess I will let you and Brian come back to my house and hang out. And I guess we can watch movies and TV and drink and stuff. It's fine. Ugh. So you can get your stupid comic book.
Kait, have you read any of the Bandette comics that Colleen Coover does? Because this sounds very similar to that, and some of the art style does remind me of Colleen Coover. Bandette.
I do. That does sound really familiar, but I think I might have just added some of them to my to-read list. Sure. I don't know that I've read them yet.
Okay. I get that vibe from just looking at the preview for this stuff, so I have to check this one out too. Looks really fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. It's definitely like a young adult kids type comic, but I had so much fun with it. And the art is beautiful. Sure. It's got like, the art has these like rough edges to the panels. Like mostly in Western comics, we see these like outlined black panels or at least these hard edges. And this one, like you can almost see the brush strokes. They just like up right on the edge of the panel. Like they don't
That's awesome.
round out the edges of the panel. It's very organic looking.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks really fun. Looks really super. I remember didn't remember this book by name, but when I saw the cover, I was like, oh yeah, this is that book. It looks very cute and fun and action adventure-y, and I love that more books like this are getting published. But of course, like Penguin Random House and all that stuff, I think they push these books because they know that they sell, but they're also really good. Like that's the best part about it, is like it's not that these companies are just trying to push these books on people for the sake of like getting books in kids' hands. They're actually really fun reads, and I'm glad to hear that this one is exactly that. So but let's move on. Paul, what about you? How have you been? How have comic books been? What have you been reading?
I've been slowly catching up on comics. I feel like I just had a stretch where just wasn't making time to sit down and read. So the past couple weeks, I've really tried to make a point to sit down at least, an hour each day to kind of read some comics, get that stack of floppies I have sitting on my coffee table shorter and shorter, each day. So, speaking of that, I did catch up and read the two most recent issues 2 and 3 of Pine and Merrimac from Boom Studios, written by Kyle Starks. Art by Fran Galan and letters by Pat Brousseau. I think, Mike, you mentioned issue 1 as like a pick a few months ago. And like, it's funny, you were talking about it on the episode. I was like, that sounds interesting. And then the next time I went to the shop, it was already pulled for me. I'd ordered it in previews and totally forgot about it. So
hell yeah.
It's really fun though. So the sort of pull, quote here, the elevator pitch is that Linnea Kent and her former MMA fighter husband Parker are a happily married couple that run a small private investigation or detective agency together in a small town. And the first issue it's Kyle Starks riffing on the tropes of a private eye story. They get hired to investigate a missing person's case. This young girl's gone missing. Issues 2 and 3 get bigger and bigger. It becomes a much more sort of sinister and darker story. But it turns into this, human trafficking and a sort of eyes wide shut type of cult activity that's going on. So, but what I like about it is that Kyle Starks is such a good writer. You really, within that first issue, and especially by the time you get to issue 3, he's fleshed those two main characters out so well. Like you feel like you're kind of with them in the story, and like their relationship. Oh, yeah. Kyle Starks is a very funny writer. They have a lot of great banter back and forth. It feels like a loving married couple that just happened to be caught in this like mysterious sort of dark, scary like cult that they end up uncovering on this small town. So it also plays with that trope of like the dark side. You find out in issue 3 that they kind of moved to a small town because they wanted to get away from murder and serious crime. They end up finding something even more disturbing in the small town. So it plays with that trope as well. And what I think I just enjoy a comic that is genre, it is based in that sort of the tropes of Private Eye. It does have Rockford File vibes to it. There's some True Detective stuff in it. That type of, those are very different shows, but it's kind of both of those worlds, but the fact that Starks gives the characters such a rich relationship and background, it makes it a really engaging read. And I'm definitely hooked for as long. I don't know if it's a miniseries or how long it's going to go. I'm definitely hooked on this series now. And part of it is Galan's artwork as well. I already mentioned Colleen Coover, and I also got similar vibes from this artwork where I don't know if it is watercolor based, but it has this sort of washed out watercolor feel to a lot of the artwork. And in those first issue, it's like they're playing up the small town innocence. By the time you get to the end of issue 3, and it is this sort of eyes wide shut, dark cult scene, it still works. Like the artwork is able to be kind of light in the scenes between Linnea and Parker, is also able to be dark and sinister when it needs to be. And it's a really, really striking book in that regard. It's also one of those books that I'm reading it physically and I'm like, man, this might pop even better on a digital screen. So I might have to when the collection comes out at some point, compare the two,
Oh yeah, and it's a Boom Studios book, so it's going to be on Hoopla, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe the best thing that Boom Studios can guarantee us these days is that their books are 95% of the time going to be available on Hoopla or in some digital format that's not going to make you pay like an overpriced amount. But no, Paul, I'm really glad to hear that you're digging this, because I thought it was really fun. Like, Kyle Stark still manages to put in little corny jokes and make these, Parker and Linnea like the corniest couple you've ever met, and yet still feel super engaging, still feel like folks that aren't just like bumbling about. This isn't like a rom-com. This is like an actual hard-hitting detective story that has like this wonderful, goofy couple at the center of it. Like, their relationship is fun, but like they're hard hitters themselves, like in all senses of the word. So
yeah. I was surprised just how action-packed it got by the second issue. Like, it really does become like an action-focused book at that point. But there's scenes when they're kind of like bantering back and forth. It's almost like sickening how in love they are, but it's charming in that same way. Like, you know what I mean? It just, he does the right balance of like making them sort of like so close to doing the baby talk cutesy too much, and never quite crosses that line. It's right there.
Yes. That is a very apt description of that. I love that. Well, let me move on. Let me talk about a book that I read recently. I was going to talk about Ultimate X-Men. I have a lot of thoughts. Like I said, I've been like just washing myself over with more X-Men stuff now that my Marvel Unlimited stuff has started to catch up to where I kind of stopped buying Marvel comics because it became financially irresponsible for me to buy 5 X-Men titles given the prices that they were coming out versus me just paying for a Marvel Unlimited subscription. But I did read Ultimate X-Men. I think I'll talk about that in the post credits. But a book that I did read that I really want to talk about is Dutch numbers 0 through 2. This is written by Joe Casey, art by Simon Gain. Issue number 0 had art by Nathan Fox, colors by Francesco Segala, with a color assist by Gloria Martinelli. And on issue number 0, Roberto Megna helped on color assist, and letters for the whole series has been by Russ Wooten. This is originally created by Chap Yap. Lot of credits on this book, and I think that's because I feel like there was an idea for a story. A 0 issue came out to test to see if it would work, and now Joe Casey is doing like the full edition of this series. I think is going to be just a 3-issue miniseries. But the basic premise of the story is there's a grizzled old hero who used to be like a anti-hero bad guy turned superhero, but he hated it the entire time. It finally got away after his prime time of being this superhero ended, and superheroes kind of just like disappeared off the face of the earth because they were no longer needed due to government, blah 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 blah. Like, if you've read superhero comics in some capacity over the last 30 years, you've probably heard a version of this story already, and Joe Casey is telling just yet another story in that same thing. But of course, Dutch, our main character, he gets pulled back in because his arch nemesis has reared his head after the team failed to put him down way back in the day when he quit. We really don't know why he quit. We really don't know how it ended. We're getting little bits and pieces of the story as the series goes on. But like I said, this is very samey in terms of a lot of like anti-hero types of stories that you've probably read in superhero comics over the last 30 years, but it's not bad, right? Like, Joe Casey has this particular writing style in the way that he does his comics that feels like you're getting a super dense story without it feeling like it's dragging on. And even when there are a lot of word bubbles, it's all very engaging dialogue and very engaging narration. And I feel like this book wouldn't work with another writer who would probably overwrite it. But Joe Casey puts just enough on the page for you to feel engaged so that when the action hits, you're like, whoa, we were in the middle of something before you interrupted this with this stupid fight with a robot. What the hell's going on here? So I've liked the book that I've read so far. Issue number 0 is a preamble kind of setting up the I'm too old for this shit, but it's all I know character of Dutch as he gets attacked to his home, which kind of sets off the main story of Dutch trying to figure out why this villain has suddenly come back after he's defeated all of his little minions over the years. And we get to see a little bit more of the world. We get to find out what happened to the superhero squad that he was on. And we get that through issues 1 and 2 in the aftermath. This book overall, though, feels like it belongs in the 90s, but it has somehow been like reimagined in the year 2024. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, because Simon Gain, who's the artist on issues 1 and 2, really takes that like blocky, over pocketed, over like actiony vibe that you get from the 90s and like revamps it into his own style that I feel like you would see like you would see someone like Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee do like super fine lines with, but instead Gain has these really large, blocky, thick-lined characters that is very standard for his art style, but it like super works with this over-the-top action piece, set piece that this entire book is based around. So like it's funny to see issue 0 drawn by Nathan Fox, who has his own rich, beautiful style of art, get followed up by Simon Gain, because like we get this kind of traditional superhero capey style comic book in issue 0, and then Simon Gain follows it up with just this really blocky, it reminds me a lot of like Jason Howard's early work. And again, if you've read, Simon Gain has done plenty of comics on their own, so I don't mean to like act like they're some new artists, because they've been around for a really long time, but still it's such a whiplash of art style, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I like that Gain is really focused on like driving these like overly blocky, super thick line characters in every single page. And his style is very, very particular that I think will probably throw people. But if you like it, this book totally kicks ass. And it feels like a classic Image Comics book in like their full top tier, like bullshit 90s style, but done in 2024 in a way that really works. And it feels like we're not getting the schlock that would probably come as baggage from those 90s comics. Instead, we're just getting like cut and dry action. I feel like if you liked Declan Shalvey's Old Dog book that he did, you'll really, really like this book. I feel like it's even more straightforward than Old Dog was, which was a little convoluted and circular at times. But yeah, anyways, I feel like you could read worse comics these days in such a short span. There's like 4 issues. There are far worse miniseries out there than this one. I think this one is like a really, really like solid, compact story. So I can't wait for issue 3. That's what I'm trying to say.
Interesting. I mean, Dutch, that is an old character. He was in Youngblood. I mean, so that is a classic Image character.
God damn it. Okay. Paul, I swear to God, I tried to research this and then I got totally lost in reading the comic. But okay. So this is an old character brought back to life. This makes so much sense. Jeez, oh, Pete's. Okay.
I do think it's interesting because, like, you know, I've been reading comics. I remember when all Image was founded. I remember all those early Image stuff. It wasn't my bag.
Yeah.
You know, but I remember all that stuff and seeing ads for that when I was reading Wizard magazine, and like I knew, I was aware of all of that. It's really funny to now that's become nostalgia, where you do have someone like Joe Casey who probably did grow up reading those comics and like has a connection, an emotional attachment to stuff that, you know, seems antiquated, you know, even though it's like 30 years ago, but still like that 90s stuff, like to have someone come back and be like, oh, I can still use this character and revamp it and make it feel contemporary in 2024. That's kind of cool, you know, because I think a lot of that early Image stuff, at least for me, since I don't have nostalgia for it, just seems sort of schlocky. So
sure,
you know, I would be curious to kind of see if there can revamp a character like Dutch, who always just seemed like kind of a throwaway guy in the background. You see the ads for Youngblood, so.
Interesting. See, you know, this is the problem. I didn't even read the solicit on Dutch number 0. I would have had all these answers, and I would have maybe given a different pitch on this book. From the combustible creative team of Casey and Fox, the original Dutch and is back. Okay, never mind. Thank you. I'm glad, Paul. I'm so glad that you're on this episode, because otherwise I feel like I'd just be getting emails from people saying, "Mike, are you stupid?
Dumb.
Do you not know how to use Google?" And the answer is no.
Yeah.
I put all of my queries through ChatGPT, and then I run it through DALL-E to give me visual representation of what I'm looking for these days. Come on,
Perfect.
everybody. Anyways, let's move on. Before we get into that, Kait, I know you had something you want to talk about before we get into the top of our pile. So do you want to jump into that before we do that?
Yeah, I saw that. I recently saw that there is something called the Trans Rights Readathon that is happening right now. It's March 22nd through the 29th. I think this is only their second year, which is probably why I haven't heard of it yet. This is kind of like as a celebration of Trans Rights Day, or the Trans Day of Visibility on March 31st. And this is a readathon. You can kind of participate however you want. You can involve other people, or you can just do it yourself. You can just read one book, or you can read however many books you want. There's also a donation aspect to this if you want to donate. Again, it's very flexible.
Sure.
And you can find their website at transrightsreadathon.carrd.co. And I also found another resource, which is queercomicsdatabase.com, to help you find books with trans characters or by trans authors. The readathon also includes kind of the whole like rainbow umbrella, genderqueer, non-binary, gender non-conforming, two-spirit. So it's kind of, again, it's very flexible. And if you need some personal recommendations,
Yeah.
I am working on a reread of the Tea Dragon series by Kay O'Neill, and I recently reread Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Zhu. And if you're looking for a trans creator, Mags Visaggio is like a favorite creator on the show. I feel like I hear her name a lot on here. I really liked her series Vagrant Queen. So, but there's a lot of books. There's so many diverse books out there now to represent the queer community. So, yeah, look a couple up, go to your local shop. If you want to participate in this, it's you can find that online. You can post about it if you want to, you know, like they kind of just seem like they're into participation of any kind.
Yeah. Yes. See, even participation like myself, who I didn't even know that this was happening this week, and I read a book by a trans creator, Adversary by Blue Delaquante. So, like,
there you go.
Look at that. I'm participating. I didn't even know. That's cool. No, okay. I'm really glad that you brought that to us because, like, it's an important day, March 31st. Everyone should go out and celebrate as a recognition. But yeah, no, this is really cool. We'll make sure the links to this stuff is in the show notes. But thanks for bringing that to us.
Yeah, I'm glad that I saw something about it online. I think I saw this on Instagram.
Yeah. Those Instagram ads are working. I guess Facebook is doing one thing right.
They get me. I get caught in so many Instagram ads.
Yeah, same. But let's talk about books on the top of our pile, books that are new or old or just something we're trying to get off of our shelf. I want to shout out some of the folks on our Discord who I reached out to. I said, hey, we're going to be doing an episode live. If you're a member of our Discord, you can give us a book and we'll shout it out on the next episode of the show. So folks that were hanging out on Discord today were Stephanie, who's going to be reading The Best We Could Do by T. Bui. Paul G is going to be reading Haru by Joe Latham. Furret's going to be reading Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. And Danny is going to be reading X-Men 97 #1 because Marvel managed to publish something at the same time as another property. And they do this more often than not. I just feel like this is like a really nice direct connection. But Danny, let us know how it is. I will not be picking this up. So I'm going to I guess I'll kick things over to Paul. What's on the top of your pile this week?
Well, wouldn't be an episode of I Read Comic Books with me on it if I didn't talk about Judge Dredd, because I'm in this thing right now where like it's kind of like the only thing that's clicking for me. I know I just praised Pine and Merrimac. There are other books I like, but when I'm sitting at home at night reading, something about Judge Dredd just is like working for me right now. So I'm reading this book, the collection that came out about 2 weeks ago. It's called Judge Dredd, A Penitent Man. And this is a collection of 3 stories written by Kenneth Niemand, art by Tom Foster, colors by Chris Blythe, and letters by Annie Parkhouse. And like I said, this came out a couple weeks ago. We got a free copy from 2000 AD. Again, thank you, Tharg, for giving us the comps. And this is kind of a collection of, like I said, 3 connected stories that came out about 2 or 3 years ago. So it's contemporary Dredd. And it follows a character named Kyle Asher, who's a former judge. And, I talk a lot about how Judge Dredd feels like a critique of modern day policing. One thing that Dredd does that modern day policing does not do is that if a judge breaks the law, if there's a corrupt judge who violates the law they've been sworn to uphold, they actually get severely punished, which obviously that's the most unrealistic thing about Judge Dredd. So so Kyle Asher was a judge who he ended up like beating a citizen to death. He was like excessive violence. So he got sentenced to Titan. And that's what happens if you're a judge and you violate the law. You get sent to work on one of the moons of Jupiter, Titan, doing slave labor, basically. But you have to, because Titan is uninhabitable without a spacesuit, they basically put a breathing apparatus on your nose. They basically surgically like alter you. So you're always scarred for having broken the law. So
I see.
Anyway, Kyle Asher is a judge. He served 20 years on Titan. He comes back to Mega City 1, and he seems like genuinely like wanting to make up for the mistakes he made as a judge. Of course, Judge Dredd doesn't understand this. Like, why would anyone do that? I'm immediately suspicious of this character. So
sure.
Along the way, in the first story in this volume, you find out that the Special Judicial Squad, which is kind of the Eternal Affairs aspect of the judge program, they will use intimidation to force judges who come back from Titan out of Mega City 1. So Dredd finds out about this, and like, it's a bigger story, not just about Dredd specifically, but about Mega City 1 and about the judge program, and how is there a way in this militarized sort of fascistic police state, is there a way for someone to be generally like redeemed and have forgiveness and have justice? So it's a really complex story. And again, I like a story that doesn't necessarily focus on Dredd. He's kind of a side character. Former Judge Asher is the main character, but you get a sense of Mega City 1 as an idea and as a concept. So in that regard, I thought it was a really interesting story. And also helps that the artwork by Tom Foster really feels like classic Judge Dredd. Like his art style looks a lot like Brian Boland, like very realistic, very gritty. So it feels like you're in Mega City 1 when you're reading this book. And I think it really functions as a book that anyone can just pick up and read. Because Judge Dredd can be intimidating because there's 45 years of, continuity that's never been rebooted. I think a story like this, because it focuses on a small character, you get sort of an emotional connection to this guy looking to redeem himself for a mistake that he made. And you can kind of jump right in without having read a lot of other Dredd stories. So it's a good standalone volume. So I think if you're looking to get some Judge Dredd comics that look at a bigger issue, this idea of justice and idea of redemption, it's a really good story. So I highly recommend it. Of course, I'm going to recommend a Judge Dredd comic, but I thought this is a good one for maybe casual fans who I want to try something different.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, this looks really cool. I think you mentioned in your notes that like this feels like an instant classic. I feel like just your description of this feels like an exploration of the Dredd universe, the Mega City 1 universe, whatever you want to call it, that like as far as I know, like hasn't been touched on, because I feel like if it had been, it would be like a monumental story that they would have been pushing. So like I really like that.
Yeah, and again, it's a recent story, and like it feels like 2000 AD is like pushing this as a collection, because it does feel like you said, like in my notes, it's like sometimes you just start reading a Dredd story, it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be a classic, and I got that vibe right away from the first couple pages, like, oh yeah, this is an important story. So yeah, check it out.
Nice. Well, let me talk about a book that's on the top of my pile this week, and that is Feral #1. Spoilers, I already read this book because Image also gave us a nice comp for this book. So like I've already read it, kind of already know what it's about. But the reason why it's on the top of my pile is because I do kind of want to go back and reread it after I've read this creative team's previous work, Stray Dogs, that came out. I remember there was like a huge hype over the Stray Dogs series for some reason. I think there was like a variant issue that became a hot commodity for people that do that. But I did read Feral #1. This is by Tony Fleeks, written by Tony Fleeks, art by Tone Rodriguez and Trish Forstner, colors by Brad Simpson. And basically, I'll say from the get-go, I was crying because it's about cats. It's about cats that have been picked up by like a pet collector or something, like the people that pick up stray animals, and they're in the back of a truck and they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, sometimes this happens, and then when we go out, the people give us food. And the way that Tony Fleeks writes all of the characters in this, they're just cats who kind of don't understand the world, and that to me breaks my heart, because there's clearly something bad going on in this book, and we don't really know what it is from the beginning of the story. There's maybe some mysterious thing that we hear on the radio, and the cats are like, what's all this noise? What's actually happening right now? But yeah, it's cats being taken to a shelter. The car that they're in, it crashes. They're out in the wild alone. I feel like I'm not spoiling too much here by telling you this. But all the cats, or the thing that I think that really crushed me, is that this entire book is drawn kind of like in an old Disney style, like 101 Dalmatians, Aristocats style, where you're like, oh, I love these adorable little things. I hope nothing awful befalls them. Guys, I'm sorry, but some awful things are gonna happen in this book. This isn't to the level of something like We Three, where you're like, oh shit, this is like animal torture. But it is kind of like heartbreaking, because you very quickly learn to love these cats. Tony Fleeks does an incredible job making you fall in love with every little dumb character that's in this book. And I say dumb because sometimes cute things are dumb, and they can be two things at once, right? But like, I I really, really liked it. It's a horror book. They keep pitching it as a horror book, and I understand, and that's because it's terrible to see very cute small things have bad things happen to them, or potentially have bad things happen to them. But yeah, I don't know what kind of monstrous thing is going on inside of this creative team's head to say like, yeah, we did one about dogs, now let's do one about cats. I have to imagine that they just really want a lot of hate mail. But nonetheless, this was a good read. I liked it. I thought it was fun. And I think that if you're looking for a book that is probably going to be a big seller, that's just an interesting read, a little bit off the beaten path for what Image is usually doing, which is sci-fi, fantasy, all the kind of stuff that's just like, comics are about something bigger, man. This book is just a story about cats. And I kind of like that. So check this out. I think folks will really, really like it. I think this will be a great collection too, right? Like I can tell just from the pacing, from my understanding of Stray Dogs, I think this is going to be a good collection as well. But the one last thing I'll say is at the end of this issue, they did say, hey, if you have a cat and you want to send a photo of your cat to be printed in the back pages, do that. So immediately I took one of the millions of photos I have of my cats and emailed them over. So keep an eye out for Kit Kat and Twix. Those are my two cats that may be in the back of Feral number 2 or 3, or who knows when it'll get printed. But
nice.
Yeah, anyways, Feral number 1, I highly recommend it. Go read it. It's, but sorry to kind of cheat on this week's show.
Maybe they made this comic book just to get pictures of people's cats.
I mean, I would understand that.
Yeah.
But Kait, what about you? What is on the top of your pile this week?
So I picked something from that super old to-read list. Approximately 2015 is when I added this one. And it's called Lovelace and Babbage. This is by Sydney Padua. And I'm cheating a little bit by putting this on my top of my pile because I have read the first couple of pages.
I read the whole damn issue, Kait. It's fine. I read all of Feral. You're fine.
So this book, Lovelace and Babbage, is based on two real people, Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage. Babbage had developed a very early mechanical calculator in 1842. I mentioned steampunk stuff earlier in this episode. It looks this machine looks very steampunk. Ada Lovelace had been raised to be a mathematician so that she didn't end up risqué like her dad, Lord Byron. But it sounds from the nonfiction parts of the story, it sounds like she was both an incredible mathematician and also a little risqué. So Babbage offered Ada Lovelace his plans for a second machine that he was trying to build, and she returned them with so many footnotes, more footnotes than there were plans. And taking all these things together, she had ideas for software. So she was basically coming up with a computer, super early mechanical computer. Unfortunately, that second machine was never built. But this book, I think I've read up to the point where all of this is nonfiction in this book, and now I'm about to dig into the Elseworlds type story that they're going to have going on. Because
historical fan fiction, is that what I'm hearing?
That is absolutely what this is.
I love it.
Because the story kind of supposes that Ada Lovelace didn't die in her 30s and that Lovelace and Babbage built this machine, and I think that they're basically going to become technology and math-based superheroes.
Great.
Cool.
So there is something about this book though that is a lot to read, and I either didn't know this going in, or I had completely forgotten this in the last 9 years since this has been on my to-read list, which is that there are so many footnotes in this comic book. And so far the footnotes, even at the very beginning of this Elseworlds type story, the footnotes are still nonfiction. These ideas came from somewhere real. And I don't know if this is just a bit. I don't know if this is a comedy thing. I don't know if this is an explanation of where the story comes from. But I feel in any case, it's a reference to the fact that Ada Lovelace left an incredible number of footnotes in the plans to Babbage.
I see.
This is not going to be a fast read. I made the mistake of also getting a few other things out of the library when I got this out, and I might just have to buy this book and read the other things I have to give back to the library, because this is going to be a lot to read. But I'm looking forward to it. Like, it's very goofy and also historically based so far.
Well, Aaron in the chat says that's how you know the bit is effective, when readers wonder if it's a bit or not. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. I think what's funny is that's exactly how I felt about reading Mary Tyler Moorhawk by Dave Baker, who we had in the show very recently. Like, reading through that book, you're like, are the footnotes a bit? And then as you read the book, you're like, are they a bit? Like, you really can't tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very effective.
I did find one page where 3/4 of the page was just footnotes, and there were like 2 panels of a comic.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I don't know if I can call this a comic book. This is I read books, I guess.
Yeah.
Podcast.
I read books with pictures podcast.
Yeah.
That's how I write my Substack. Is I post I basically write something and it's just like 40 footnotes at the end, which are just full of jokes for me, like pictures of Vegeta and Goku and stuff, just like for fun. Well, that sounds great, Kait. You'll have to update us on how far you get on that next time you're on the show, because I've heard of this book before, and I think I've seen it in places, and it's intimidating to look at it. Like, I think I've seen this in comic shops, like at Vault of Midnight in Grand Rapids. I think they had this on their shelf for forever, and I was always intimidated by it because the bright colors the bright color of the comic is like. Is that the page, Kait?
I just opened a page and it was all text, like zero comics.
Kait,
but there are comics in it.
Those of you listening to this, Kait opened a page and it looked like a textbook.
Whoops, this is not an I Read Comic Books podcast anymore.
Yeah. Kait reads like deep, intricate technological documents podcast. That'll be fun.
Apparently.
If we get to 100 patrons, we'll have Kait read through technical specification documentation.
Nice.
And for it, if you're asking in the chat, would Goku and Vegeta be X-Men fans? Get more patrons, and I will write that essay. I'm just saying that. But I guess to wrap up the show here, I want to say I have a lot of thoughts about X-Men that I'm going to save for the post credits. But I want to remind everybody that the Trans Day of Visibility is on March 31st. So make sure you're look into the links that we're going to post in the show notes for that. The transrightreadathon.card.co, as well as Queer Comics Database for all list of the various comics by queer creators that you could go read or could read anytime that you want, really. It's a nice database for that stuff. But to wrap up this show, I will say next week's episode is going to be me and Nick and Brian. We're promising to keep the trading card game talk to a minimum. People have been screaming at me in my email about it. We'll keep it to a minimum. We'll keep it to the post credits, I promise. I want to say thank you to Paul and Kait for the episode today. This was really fun. Thank you to Brian for proof listening. Thank you to all of you watching us live on Twitch, and thank you to everyone on Discord who sent over their picks for this week's show. And I want you to remember, until next time, comics are good, and so are you.